Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Trey Ball. We thank you for listening. If you want to hear full-length episodes of Outside the Playbook, head on over to our Spotify or Apple pages, and you can listen to full-length episodes about 35 to 40 minutes long. Get some more content that's not just about what's going on in the league right now. But today, what we're going to talk about the NBA playoffs 2021, the first round. We see the Philadelphia 76ers move on. The Atlanta Hawks in the East, they move on. Milwaukee, Brooklyn. That's it for the Eastern Conference. For the West, we see the Lakers got sent home by the Phoenix Suns. A surprising turn of events. Clippers are able to come back from a 3-2 deficit, send the Mavericks home. Then the remaining two, we have the Denver Nuggets and the Utah Jazz. What was one of the biggest things that stood out to you in the first round?
Yeah, I mean the historically, right? LeBron James getting put out first round. I think to me it wasn't a total surprise once I saw AD go down, and so Phoenix was just too good for the Lakers to be able to try to beat them without AD. I think if AD was healthy, I think they probably would have been able to take out Phoenix in 6, maybe 7 games.
Really?
I thought Lakers still, when you compare the Lakers of last season to this season,
yeah,
I would argue that they got better as a team with the additions that they made. And so, to me, I thought that they would have been able to probably take out Phoenix. Like I said, I think it wouldn't have been an easy series. So I by no means thought it would have been a 4 or 5 game, type of series. But yeah, when AD went down, I was like, yeah, it's over. So yeah, that wasn't a total surprise. And then I think I didn't expect the Dallas and Clippers series to go as long as what it did. And obviously there was a lot of talk after those first couple losses of they're about to implode like they did last season, so on and so forth. So they managed to get it done.
Kawhi turned that switch on. That's what happened.
Yeah, Kawhi definitely. I think too, and what really helped that game 7, you had a much better contribution from the supporting role players than what you did in game 6 when they lost that game. And so, they lost that game. But yeah, so I mean, Clippers bench and the supporting characters, role players, they came through. I mean, Marcus Morris had a much better game than what he did, previously. You had others actually come through and not.
It was like Morris and Tim Hardaway Jr. swapped places for that last game. In Game 7, Absolutely. that was a big deal with him going over 20. That was probably the biggest difference in my eyes, because if you look at the other side, you didn't have too many contributors for Dallas. You just had maybe just Doncic for the most part, and up until Game 7, Tim Hardaway was his second best player. So without those others, for Dallas really chipping in, I mean, Finney Smith, he had a decent series, but he's not going to go out and get you 20 to 25 that you need to beat, Kawhi, Rondo, PG, Morris, when they're all playing elite level of basketball like they were. One thing that I wanted to, what'd you say?
Even Luke Kennard, like a name that we haven't mentioned like the whole series, even came through with a contribution. So I thought that was interesting on the Clippers. You talk about support from the unexpected, but I think going forward, just learning experience for Dallas. Dallas is not going to be a serious team unless I think Porzingis needs to step things up a bit.
Well,
and I don't know. But
did you see what he said?
I actually
he
did.
said he told someone, and somebody relayed the message that he's been frustrated with Doncic because he felt like Luka has been dominating the ball. He feels more like a afterthought than an actual co-star, which, I mean, if you're not there on a regular basis, you are an afterthought. They're not used to having you out there, so.
Yeah, it's true. If it wasn't for Doncic, the Mavs wouldn't have been there. Plain and simple.
Not even remotely
not even
where they were positioned in the playoffs. I believe they were number 6 or something like that. They almost ended up in the play-in, same position the Lakers were in. So, yeah. I mean, not necessarily. I don't see it as a learning experience. I just see it as, it just shined light on areas they need to tweak, who they need to move, who they need to keep. How they can help Luka get to that next level. One player that I've really been impressed with, especially in the first round, I mean, you expect Devin Booker, the scorer that he is, to have some big games here and there. But for his first playoff experience, he looked like a vet, especially when it came down to it, when it was time for them to put the Lakers out of the playoffs. He comes through on a road with 47 points. I believe he had 8 threes, most of which came in the first quarter. I think in the first quarter alone, he had 5 or 6 3-pointers. So, even when the Lakers kept, pushing it and coming back and trying to make a game of it, they got it down to 10 at one point. Every single time they had an answer in Booker, and he provided so much psychologically for his teammates. If you look at certain games, when especially the first time in the playoffs, a lot of the others they relied even greater or even more heavily on the leader of the team. And like I said, he came through like a vet. That really surprised me.
Yeah, no doubt. I think Booker definitely put his stamp on the series, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what Phoenix will do as him being their cornerstone player, their franchise player. It's looking up for the Suns now. I mean, they've been down and out for some time, and like
that's
10
plus
positive
years.
I would say coming out of. Yeah, it's been a while, since Phoenix was. I mean, what? Mike D'Antoni, Steve Nash type of days when Phoenix.
I think it was Alvin Gentry was the last coach of the Suns when they went to the playoffs and played Kobe.
Right. So I mean, you're talking years, like you said, that Phoenix has even been in anybody's mouth as a conversation, factor. So yeah, I mean, definitely, commendable job to Monty Williams and the rest of the staff there, and obviously Chris Paul came in. He made a huge, significant difference with the team, and so I think it's things are looking up for Phoenix. I mean, I'm not ready to say they win the West, but they're going to be a tough out. Whoever ends up putting them down they're going to have their hands.
They are one of the underrated pickups for them, though. I feel is Jay Crowder. Because playing in the West, I feel like they didn't have much of a defensive identity. The West is a very up and down conference. A lot of high-powered backcourts, a lot of dominant guards. But you also have, you run into LeBron, you run into the Dames, the Anthony Davises, really dominant offensive players. You need somebody that can take that challenge night in and night out. I think having Crowder, that series would look very different if they didn't have him, whether AD was healthy or not, because you run to the situation where we could see that Miami LeBron that went into Boston, put up the 40 and 15 plus game. You know what I'm saying? That type of performance, had he not been there. He's not going to completely shut LeBron down. He still had 29 at game 6. But you don't have the risk of him going full-blown, all right, I'm going for 40, drop 20 in the fourth quarter, we come back and stun you guys, and we fly back to Phoenix for game 7.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, every team, in my opinion, is going to need, like, at least somebody to fill that, like what they call the 3-and-D role. Like, all right, you can shoot and you can play defense, so you can space the floor and you know how to defend, some of the best players on the opposing side. And no doubt Jay Crowder fits that 3-and-D mold. I think that was, I agree.
Excuse me.
Significant up for Phoenix.
You're right. The 3-and-D role. I do feel like going forward, they have to, if they want to keep working towards a championship, I want to see them solidify that the forward position, not Crowder's position, that's small forward. I'm talking about a power forward position, somebody that can space it even more, so you can throw it into Ayton every now and then, and he has an isolation back down situation. Keep an eye on somebody like Kelly Olynyk. He's gonna be pretty sought after. So teams like Golden State, Portland, Phoenix now, maybe Utah, they're all going to probably be gunning for him because I like the way he fits. Again, next to Gobert or next to a DeAndre Ayton, or if you're Portland, next to, Yusuf Nurk, you like the way he fits in there. So Phoenix is going to have to take a look at him because I like that fit. Looking at the series of Utah and Memphis, okay? I was very impressed. Not necessarily, you know what you're gonna get with Utah. Tough defenders. Gobert is Defensive Player of the Year. There's always gonna be defense. All right, defensive stoppers. You have Royce O'Neal, you have Donovan Mitchell, you have Mike Conley, who's been defending his position for years at a high level. Rudy Gobert, Joe Ingles is a very intelligent defender. Pesky, he'll get under your skin. But offensively, I feel like the first game they knew they didn't have that go-to option. Utah knew they didn't have a go-to option, and so did Memphis. So they kind of kept running the tempo up with Donovan Mitchell. You've seen the last 4 games, there was a calming factor. Somebody you can throw the ball to when you need a bucket, no matter what speed the game is going at, whether you need, transition buckets, whether you're playing a run and gun style, the pace is picking up. You're playing against a lot of young players in Brooks, Morant, Bane, Jackson. You have a lot of up and down at times. You need somebody that can manage the hectic pace and still get a high percentage shot. I feel like you've seen a maturity level in Donovan Mitchell that we haven't seen prior years, especially last year when they dropped the ball with a 3-1 lead and you go back and forth with Denver, you play with your food, and you end up losing that series. I think this year they learned from that. They calmed themselves down when Donovan Mitchell came back. He calmed everything down, slowed the pace, sped it up. He was in complete control of the series. And, his scoring, that's always been there. But, he did facilitate quite a bit, took a lot of pressure off Mike Conley. So Mike Conley wasn't focused on getting this person a bucket, getting this person a touch. He could just play his game. He was, scoring when needed. I like those two when healthy going forward in this playoff run, because like I said, the Lakers aren't there. You don't have to go against Portland. Golden State's at home. You don't have to run into that backcourt where you're ultimately outgunned, outclassed, and outperformed every single game, because you don't have the firepower to match up. So like I said, I do like that backcourt going forward, and they showed it in the first round.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But to me, I expected to see a significant difference, because Mitchell's their guy, so that's the effect that you expect the star guy to have. It should be a pretty different team with them off the court compared to them being on the court. So when I saw Donovan, just how much that series shifted by his presence, I wasn't necessarily surprised. On the other end, I think you knew you were going to get some good performances, some great performances from Ja Morant. I think he has a great future. Even going back to the play-in series where they put down Golden State, I thought he had some really great performances. So, going forward, Memphis has, I think, some more moves that they can make to really put themselves in that, legit, conversation, especially with it being the Western Conference. But no doubt, I think Morant showed himself to be, what we know to be. He's a star. He's a star guy in the league. So I enjoyed being able to watch him as well. During
he played phenomenal. The only thing that bugs me about Ja Morant kind of has nothing to do with Ja Morant. So you listen to people call his games and they'll say stuff like, we've never seen somebody like this. We've never seen people make these adjustments midair, or do this move, or move at this pace. People are so disrespectful to Derrick Rose, just absolutely disrespectful, and it just bugged me. I watched the game against Golden State, then the series against Utah, and they just kept just hitting it the same time. Like, dude, Derrick Rose back in 9, 10, and 11, even part of 12, he was different. That was a different animal. And we talked a little bit about, the Clippers, Dallas series. We talked about Utah. We talked about Phoenix. One series I really didn't care who came out of it was the Denver-Portland series. And Portland is my other team. I always got an East Coast, West Coast team. I love Portland. But I think they needed to lose in a way, because they needed to restart. They needed to reset. You have Dame putting on all this weight on his shoulders. He had that 55-point game, still wasn't enough. I think it's time to do some retooling, not necessarily a complete rebuild because you still have one of the best scorers in the game, but I think you have to look at who you have next to Dame. Is CJ enough? Do you think that adding a Kelly Olynyk would help, your chances at getting to the NBA Finals? Maybe making a trade for a guy like Porzingis to add to your team, not necessarily be a co-star. They have to look at a lot, and I think coaching wise, I would lean towards Chauncey Billups a little bit. He's been around for a long time. Him and Dame, I feel like you're watching Chauncey 2.0 when you look at Dame. The calm, the demeanor, the leadership. I've never seen Dame crack under pressure. Never seen that from Chauncey. When I'm talking about, Shaq likes to throw out the comment, when the general doesn't panic, the troops won't panic. He's always even keeled, just like Chauncey was for Detroit back in the 04 to 08, 09 run. So when I watch that interaction, I think it'll be great for that team. Another thing that they have to key in on is, do we bring back Melo, and how do we change our defensive philosophy? Because Terry Stotts is out. He did a good job. He has the longest run in the NBA of making it to the playoffs as far as coaching goes. But I do think they need to do a good hard look at personnel and coaching. But I think you found your guy in Chauncey.
Yeah, I would love to see Chauncey get the position. Obviously, I'm a Pistons fan and 04 and everything, Mr. Big Shot. So I would love for him to get that head coaching opportunity. I agree that I think him and Dame would be a good fit. As far as who you need next to Dame, I wouldn't necessarily, eye CJ right now. When you talk about the best backcourts, it was always Stephen Clay, Dame, and CJ. So I don't think it would be wise to try to put somebody else next to Dame right now. I think CJ's very skilled. I think he, I wouldn't say he's better than Clay, but he has the ability to go off. Like, we've seen him go off in a very similar way that we've seen Clay go off like crazy. So I think they both have that capability, and which, like I said, it's been proven over the years. So I'd say if anything, you leave Dame and CJ, and then could they possibly find a better center? Nurkic is not going to be mentioned amongst the the jokers or Gobert or Embiid, but can he hold his own? He's okay.
Defensively, he's atrocious.
Top tier,
oh my god!
But I think, defensively he can definitely be better. He's a target for other teams, but as far as double type stuff, it's like he has the ability to be able to do that. If anything, I say keep Dame, CJ, and Nurk. I think Norman Powell was
almost forgot about that trade with Toronto for Gary Trent Jr.
Yeah, so he made a significant difference, I think, even with the that you saw in this series with Denver. So I think you keep Norman Powell just as that extra offensive punch, and he can kind of be that step up as like a third scorer when Dame and CJ on the floor as well. So it's going to be interesting to see now that Portland, this first round loss has prompted them to, I think, reevaluate things with Terry Stotts and some of the coaching changes. So, as long as you have somebody like Dame, you always got a source of optimism. As long as you got a player like him, his caliber player. So that's my feedback.
I'm still on the fence with the whole CJ thing. I'm still on the fence. Only because, like, they've been together for a long time. They know each other's games. Is it a situation where everybody's just too comfortable right now? You know what I'm saying? Like, they just got comfortable over the years, just doing the same old. Are they just too lazy to actually look at moving CJ? Have they tested the market to see what they can get back for him? Whether it's a draft pick, whether it's a player. Like, I think you can get some really good pieces for CJ. Maybe either another all-star or superstar. I'm not advocating, just CJ's the problem or anything like that. I'm just saying if you're looking at retooling to that magnitude, then maybe he's the place you got to start.
I would say if they move CJ, I mean, I think that communicates a pretty significant message. I mean, I think he's the second most important piece on the team beside, behind Dame. So if they were to move him, I think it's going to send a clear message that they're really looking to reset. Yeah. If they do something with him, I don't know just how much of value they would get back. I mean, I haven't looked at the market or anything like that. I know people are saying like the upcoming draft is pretty stocked with talent. So, could you get something back of value? Probably, but like I said, I think I would give it, at least another season with those two, and then just kind of see what moves or what changes, outside of those two that you can make, and just run it back next season and see what the difference could be. But to be honest, I thought that the series between Denver and Portland could have gone either way. And I think they had, that's one of those teams, man, where they're really evenly matched, I feel like. And so I didn't really have a clear-cut winner. It's just like, honestly, whoever just shows up and plays better is going to come out. I saw, situations where Portland could come out, especially with Denver not having Jamal Murray. And then I saw, basically the way that Joker had been playing all season.
Yeah, and you wouldn't blame Denver for losing, but with Joker being the consensus MVP favorite, people would look at that like, hey, MVP favorite, you should come out of the West first round, no matter what, no matter who's on the other side or who's on your roster, you should be able to carry that weight. I guess the same could be said if you look on the flip side, look at the Eastern Conference to, the 76ers, Embiid in and out of the lineup, being hurt. Ben Simmons isn't exactly an MVP favorite, but he is, would we say top 15, top 20 in the league as far as, both sides of the ball, defensively, offensively, being a facilitator, occasionally scoring. I think he averaged like 14 points, but he had some big games when they played Washington. On the other side, when you're looking at Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook, tough backcourt. Not much else after that with Scott Brooks being the head coach as well. So it's like you like defense philosophy, and you also don't have enough firepower to battle the likes of Embiid, Simmons, Curry, Harris. There's a lot of firepower when you look at Philadelphia's roster, and then you have a defensive state of mind, a defensive presence with Doc Rivers as their coach. So you bring in a Dwight Howard and you have a Marquise Thibault, two very good defenders to pair with Ben Simmons and Embiid. You're going to have problems, getting to where you need to go or getting past them. So I feel like that was a very easy first round for them. Like I said, Joker is the favorite for MVP. Embiid missed some games. I don't think Joker's missed any the entire season. So that's the way it's going to look. But how do you feel about Embiid, from the first round not being healthy going into the second round?
I still feel pretty good. Obviously he couldn't play that last game against Washington. They still got it, put down on the Wizards without him. I personally lean more so towards Joel's MVP over Jokic. I'm not the type that's going to penalize somebody because they were legit hurt. That's just me. So I'm feeling still pretty good about Philly. I think, dude, if Joel stays healthy and stays in a good rhythm, I definitely see Philly going to the Eastern Conference, championship round. Maybe coming out of the East, depending on what happens with the Nets and the Bucks. But dude, a healthy Joel Embiid, his team is number one in the East. To me, that bears more weight in terms of the impact on the team versus a Denver So I think just like you can penalize Joel for being missing games and whatnot, I think you also need to penalize Jokic a little bit because of where his team is in the standings. But then they also lost their point guard. So it's a lot of things that you can say, going back and forth. But to answer your question, I'm feeling good about Philly. I think they're going to be able to come out against the Hawks round 2 and end up in Eastern Conference Championship, which is one of the goals that they wanted for the season. So I think if they end up Eastern Conference Finals, I think that's a win for them if they come out of the East.
We talked enough about Miami, so we're not going to cover the Milwaukee-Miami. We're not going to talk about that. I don't even want to talk about that. Don't be disrespectful. Brooklyn and Boston. Boston underachieved heavily, but also they had a lot of COVID protocols, injuries as well, similar to the Miami situation. Jaylen Brown goes out with a major injury during the playoffs, so ultimately it's just Jason Tatum versus everybody. We know Kemba Walker wasn't that much of a help, but having to guard Kevin Durant, Kyrie, James, Joe Harris went off a couple times. Blake Griffin contributed a lot. Brent Brown, he came off the bench, played great minutes. They had a lot of contributors throughout that series, not just the big three, but that big three, at one point tallying 104 of their 130, 140 points. I mean, that's an incredible feat. It's expected. What do you think about their first round performance? Should they have even lost a game to Boston?
If I remember correctly, that's a game that Jason Tatum kind of went off on, and I wasn't honestly expecting much out of that series. I mean, that was one that I really, even though I was paying very close attention to the Nets throughout the regular season, it wasn't a series that I was paying that much attention to because
so it was kind of like you just know what's going to happen, so you're just kind of like you said, whatever happens. We know they're going to move on. Let's just see how they're playing, how Brooklyn's playing right now.
Exactly. That's exactly how I approached the series. I didn't even watch every single game. I think I caught the first 3 maybe, and then highlights on the other 2. So I didn't even watch the game where the Nets ended up losing that one to Boston. But yeah, you just kind of knew what was going to happen, and for me, I'm just naturally going to be less motivated if I know the series isn't going to be as compelling. But I think just because Boston underperformed throughout the regular season, and obviously they had COVID and protocol, as you stated, and injuries. But if it was Boston of last year, I would have been more interested, or the Boston of the year before, I would have been much more interested in that series. But for this one, I expected Brooklyn to come out fairly easily, either a 4-game sweep or a 5-game gentleman sweep. So got it done in 5 games. Yeah, they lost 1, but okay, Jason Tatum goes off. Brooklyn doesn't play as well as they could. Okay, but I don't give too much weight to that. I'm more so interested in obviously what a lot of people would consider the real Eastern Conference Finals, which is
I'm of the same mindset. Like we discussed. Whatever happens in this series happens. We just know the outcome at the end. Brooklyn ends up winning that series handedly 4-1. There was a struggle, you could say, right down the street or right around the corner at Madison Square Garden. It was a situation where all year the Knicks were playing great basketball. Julius Randle, most improved player of the year, well deserved. Derrick Rose, we seen Derrick Rose of old, dominating in the playoffs, putting up big numbers, playing phenomenal basketball. He looked healthy, he looked good, better than he's looked in quite some time. But the playoffs will do that for somebody who's been chasing after it for a handful of years. And especially playing in Madison Square Garden. Apparently, the rest of the roster didn't get it because Trae Young acted like every game was a home game, talking to the crowd, talking to the fans, people on the sideline, interactions with Spike Lee, going back and forth with Bullock. I mean, it seemed like the same situation with Devin Booker in the West. Trae Young was having the same impact. He was controlling every aspect of every game, the entire series, and the Knicks just couldn't get from under Julius Randle's poor play.
Yeah. Clearly, like, Trae didn't respect the Knicks at all. Yeah. And that's the only thing you can say is just like, it's just no respect.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, all the way to the wave goodbye, the last game. So I think that act in and of itself said, like, that's the story of the whole series to me. Was like what Trae Young did. So I like seeing just the fact that these younger guys, like we talked about Devin Booker earlier, like these younger stars are establishing themselves, and that's the part that I like to see. Like, whether you like the show off, bravado, you know, hyper aggressive type of persona or not, I think at the end of the day, you know, we all know that Trae Young's a star. We all know that, you know, he's got an incredible amount of potential in the league. So seeing him assert himself as the guy on his squad, I mean, I enjoyed seeing it. To be honest, I mean, I was glad to see the Knicks finally in the playoffs, and obviously I think Julius Randle definitely deserves most improved. But
I was just about to say that.
You know,
I was like, man, Trae Young played some good basketball, but the Knicks gon' Nick. The Knicks gon' Nick. Yeah.
Like
yep.
It's
they pulled the Dallas Cowboys on New York City.
Everybody had their hopes up. I mean, I'm just like, you know, yeah. So it's like what the fans were screaming, we want Brooklyn or something like that after they got put out. And it's
Knicks
just like,
Nick.
I can't say I wasn't surprised.
That wraps up, you know, our coverage of the first round, what we saw, what we ultimately wanted to see. A lot of young players stepping up, playing great basketball. The future of the league is very bright. Devin Booker, Trae Young, Doncic. I mean, I think Giannis is still 26 years old. A lot of basketball ahead of us. A lot of exciting basketball ahead of us. Round 1 concluded. On to round 2, we got the Bucks and the Brooklyn Nets. Brooklyn's up 1-0. Game 1 for the Phoenix Suns and the Denver Nuggets is tonight. And Philadelphia already took a big surprising L on their home court to the Atlanta Hawks. We'll see how everything shakes out in round 2. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. Special thanks to Curtis Murphy and Murphy Elite Training for sponsoring this episode. If you want to stay up to date on merchandise or simply update your game, please click the link in the description to stay up to date on all things Murphy Elite Training. Until next time, you know the rules.